And now I would like to welcome our special guest for this third day of our assembly. We have two persons from the Dicastero of the faith doctrine, la Dottrina, Dicastero per la Dottrina della Fede. Sua Eccellenza Monsignor John Kennedy e Padre Robert Geisinger. And John, thank you so much. Ecco, ho fatto una promozione. Da Sua Eccellenza, Sua Eminenza, siamo solo all'eccellenza. Bene, we are here with, we have invited them to have a meeting with all of you and to find a way of sharing, just share about their service for the church, for the religious life, and so you can also make your questions or your considerations. We will have a time of sharing, so now we can hear what they would like to share with us about their service, and then we will have, after the coffee break, a time to share together. Thank you so much to be here with us.
Good morning, everybody. I'm very glad to have this opportunity to be with you. Some of you, a lot of you, in fact, I know already from visits to our Dicastero over the years. I've been working for 24 years at the Doctrine of the Faith, and for the last 4 years, although I'm now in the 5th year, I've had the responsibility as secretary for the discipline section. I was ordained a priest in 1993 in Dublin and worked for 5 years in parish ministry before coming back to Rome to the Gregorian University to do canon law, and then the Archbishop gave me permission to work at the Doctrine of the Faith for what was an initial period of 5 years, but which has turned into a much longer period. Before I make the presentation, I'd like to invite my colleague, Father Robert Geisinger, to introduce himself briefly.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It's good to be back. Again, my name is Bob Geisinger. I am a Jesuit, so of course I want to greet my brother in Christ, my brother in Ignatius, Father Sosa. It is good to be with you. It's good to be with all of you. When I said it's good to be back, this is actually my 3rd time at a USG assembly. One was about 20 years ago. I was part of the Juridic Commission of the Union of Superiors General. I was Procurator General of the Society of Jesus at the time, from 1999 to 2014. And the Juridic Commission was a group, I presume you still have it. It was a group of about 5 or 6 of us canonists. And a member of that group was a canonist, an Augustinian, by the name of Robert Prevost. And the second time I was here was at the beginning of the pontificate of Pope Francis. And the topic was Mutuae Relationes, and the possibility of there being a new document. And now I'm back here today, after 12 years, or 11 and a half, as promoter of justice. So when I finished my 15 years as Procurator General of the Society of Jesus, Pope Francis called me to be promoter of justice at the Dicastero for the Doctrine of the Faith, which means, like Archbishop Kennedy, the two of us are deeply involved in what's called the category of reserved delics that we're going to be speaking about. Before I give the microphone back to Archbishop Kennedy, just to say pedagogically, Mario already introduced a bit of it. So we have 2 PowerPoint presentations. But when we were first invited, we were given a list of 56 questions from USG that you had submitted regarding our dicastery. The majority are of a disciplinary nature. Some are of a doctrinal nature. So we're going to be accenting the disciplinary because that's more what the two of us do, at least. So the 2 PowerPoint presentations will take us up for the rest of the time allotted us. In my portion, I'm going to be directly addressing a number of these questions. And you'll see because I'm going to be putting them on the screen. Archbishop Kennedy will give an overview. Several of the questions ask that. What does the dicastery do? How are you organized? What sections do you have? So Archbishop Kennedy will do that. I'll do some of the questions, and then we'll have the break and we can have the fuller discussion. Thank you.
I'm extremely grateful for Bob's presence here today because I think looking back many years ago, when it came to the question of child sexual abuse, the dicastery was focused primarily on helping bishops. And it's something that we do every single day of the week. We have bishops who come, they send sometimes their canonists to ask about cases. And then we have the ad limina visits when the groups of bishops come from all over the world, and we spend time trying to help them in this area. It's true that the superiors general are the people that we communicate with, and on a day-to-day basis, the procurators general are the ones that we often end up discussing the cases with. So this is a rare and very important occasion for us to be here with so many of you. And I was very anxious that we would give as much time as we could to helping you, because all of us, whether we belong to a diocese or whether we follow a religious rule, we're all called upon to serve in this particular moment in this particular area. And I'm also very grateful that Bob, as a Jesuit father, forms part of the team of the dicastery because he brings a wealth of experience and a viewpoint which takes great consideration of the aspects of the law which touch upon religious life. So as you can see, we work extremely well together as a team, and our focus, because of the unity and because of the awareness of the breadth of this problem, is focused with a view to service. Just in case you don't know where we are, this is our office, but we don't actually have the whole building. Most of the building is upstairs, 3rd floor and up, which is residential. This is the main door, although if you're coming to see us in the future, we ask you to go to the Swiss Guard gate because we don't open the door anymore, but this is the postal address. If I ever bring you upstairs, if we have time after a meeting, we have a very nice terrace upstairs on it would be the 6th floor, and we get a great view across to the Apostolic Palace, and we get to see what it's like to be the Pope, because when he looks into the square, he gets a view from the other side, so we have the mirror image of what he sees. And then looking down, we get to see the real shape of St. Peter's Square, and we get down to look, we get a chance to look into the Augustinians and to see what's happening in the Augustinianum. From the very beginning, our office has been given powers which are legal in a structure which is that of a tribunal. And in many ways, we're responsible, both in terms of theology, faith, morality, bioethics, all the doctrinal and faith questions, as well as the discipline questions. We're trying to have the best quality control we possibly have. Another way of describing what the doctrinal section does is almost like a think tank. They're a body of experts who call upon experts, who dialogue with people who understand, to help the Pope in his outreach to the Church in terms of faith, in terms of promoting, safeguarding, defending the faith, and then in the world of abuse, holding the Church to the highest standard. It all began with Pope Paul III, and he started our office back in 1542, not just by himself, but with a group of 6 cardinals. And he said to them, your job is to watch over all matters connected to the faith, which is a really big responsibility. And it was a commission that they established. The commission had a name which has been known in the Church for centuries. It was called the Holy Roman and Universal Inquisition. And this commission was a tribunal for cases principally involving heresy and schism. Then when Pope Paul IV came along in 1555, he thought it would be a good idea to keep the commission and also to enlarge its scope to include questions not just of faith, but also of morality. Then a little bit later, Pope Pius V, in 1571, he created what he thought was a good idea, a list of books that Catholics shouldn't read, because he told them it's really not good for your faith, it's not good for your spiritual life, and this book list was called the Index of Prohibited Books, and it lasted for a long time. In fact, it was only abolished in 1917. So our offices, when you come to see us, we only ask you to walk to the 2nd floor. All of our offices principally are on the 2nd floor, and some of you have been inside one of these meeting rooms where we're always glad to welcome you. Then if you ever pop into the chapel, which is really beautiful because it forms the heart of the building and really the heart of the residence. Many of the cardinals and bishops who live upstairs pop down to pray and to celebrate Mass. I have the privilege of celebrating Mass there each morning with some of the officials and some of the staff. This is the back part of the chapel. So when Pope Francis came up with the idea of Predicate Evangelium, he formulated a new structure in a reality which was already pre-existing, but he gave it a new look. Because in the past there was one prefect, a secretary, an undersecretary, and a promoter of justice. So there were 4 superiors. But under Predicate Evangelium, the Pope thought it would be a better idea for us to have a prefect and then a secretary for the 2 main sections. The first, of course, is the doctrinal section, and then the discipline section. So there are 2 secretaries and then an undersecretary and a promoter of justice. But under the doctrinal section, the archive and the matrimonial office have been put under the responsibility of the doctrinal office. So the doctrinal section is toward the front part of the building and along half of one of its sides. This is it's where the good books are, the little library where we gather every day at 12 o'clock to pray the Angelus. This is our postal address, which you all know, and the discipline office email address is one that we encourage you to use. And if you have, for example, any questions or doubts, or you're wondering what to do, an email to us can maybe help resolve the question, or at least point you in the right direction. In our daily work, we deal principally with nunciatures, who then transmit what we send to bishops. And we deal with the Procurator General, but we write to the Superior General. So these would be our main dialogue partners. Our direct contact is always, as I say, with the bishop or with the religious superior. We don't correspond with provincials. And it's really important that when provincials are sending cases to us, that they send the case through the superior. Because in that way, we can have his votum, we can have his insights into the case, and it also respects the channels of communication. It's not that we have anything against provincials, but this is the way the curial structure works. In the office, there are about 60 men and women, priests and religious from all over the world. It reflects, in many ways, the global nature of what we have been doing for 484 years. Part of the office, part of the doctrinal section, is the International Theological Commission, who receive a mandate. There are experts from all over the world who are given responsibilities to produce deeper levels of reflection on theological matters, and they come up with ideas and publications. Another similar think tank is the Pontifical Biblical Commission, which in the world of the Bible, Old and New Testament, help to deepen the understanding. We had a meeting with them recently, and we had dinner with them at the Biblicum. The whole work of the Dicastery has been synodal before the word synod was even thought of in the Vatican, because it has been collegial. It's not just the individual employee of the Vatican taking the material to himself, studying it, and writing back to the superior or to the bishop. It's very much a work of unity. A case is a case before the dicastery, not just before or in the presence of or handled by one individual. This is our prefect, Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez from Argentina. This is the secretary for the doctrinal section, an Italian priest, Monsignor Armando Matteo from Calabria, from the Diocese of Catanzaro. He is an author, a publisher, a lecturer, professor at the Urbaniana University, and for the last 4 years and 1 month he has been with us as our secretary in the doctrinal section. We also have an adjunct secretary whose principal focus is on the College for Recourses. I'll explain a little bit about that a little bit later. And his full-time job is the Archbishop of Malta. In a previous time, he was also Bob's predecessor because he was the promoter of justice for, I think, about 12 years.
No. 9 years and 11 months.
9 years and 11 months. Bob's tenure as promoter of justice has superseded him, yes?
Not that I'm proud of that.
Can I tell you a story about Cardinal Müller? I've worked for 5 prefects, but one day he called me into his office and there was a big pile of cases on the desk. I mean, honestly, the postman is very generous, and about 89% of all the post coming in is discipline. So Cardinal Müller said to me, he said, look, we have so many problems. And I said, yeah, but I said, we've had them since 1542, but we also have solutions. So we try to keep that focus in our work of, yes, we're dealing with, and this is something I say, we are dealing with problems we did not create. But we are called to provide solutions for people who need them. And together, we have the possibility of doing that. So I saw on Instagram recently a way of changing your mind. The person said, I have to go to work. I have to deal with these cases. I have to solve problems. And the change of mind is, I get to go to work each day. I get to solve problems. I have the opportunity to help people. That's what we do. The Undersecretary is Archbishop Philippe Corbellier. He's the one with the crozier. You know, Bob here. I used this presentation where Bob's picture was in it before, and I didn't put my own, so. One of the things that we deal with in the Roman Curia, no matter what department of the Roman Curia you're working in, is the question of exclusive competence. Every office is given exclusive competence. It's like, let's say we go for pizza, okay? And we slice the pizza into 8 pieces. We all have part of the pizza, but we all have a different piece. We have what we have, and that means that we don't have what we don't have. So when we write back to you and we say, it has been decided upon examination that this matter doesn't come under our competence, and we ask you to send it to the proper dicastery, it's not that we're unwilling to help you. It's that we can't help you, but somebody else can. And so it's a very good thing to underline this, because if it's ours, then we are absolutely responsible. And if we don't do it, then we're the ones to blame. Whereas if it's everybody's responsibility, it can sometimes end up being nobody's responsibility. So that's the way the Curia works. We do, however, work very closely with other dicasteries. Take saints, for example. Every time they're promoting the causes of a person who will be considered blessed or a saint, we grant a nulla osta, not on the basis of our personal devotion for that saint, but based on what we have in our archives. And it's the same thing for bishops. We get the list of the 3 names of the people who are going to be chosen, perhaps as a bishop of a diocese, and if we have something to say, which we have in our files, then we write back to the dicastery for bishop and we say, well, we have this to share with you, but the responsibility for naming the bishop is theirs and the Pope. It's the same with professors and lecturers and teachers in Catholic faculties. Anybody who's coming to work in the Holy See, in some area of employment, also has to go through us at the end to get a nulla osta. It's the same for confessors in the papal basilicas, and then at a higher level, any kind of theological document produced by another dicastery is also passed to us for a theological examination. So we come now to the area of the discipline section, and under the document which is called Sacramentorum Sanctitatis Tutela, which is our guiding document, we begin first with Article 2. Article 2 looks at questions of heresy, apostasy, and schism. Now, you might be surprised to know that while 70% of the work of the dicastery involves abuse of minors, 10% of the work involves crimes against the faith. And the biggest crime against the faith that we examine would be cases of schism. So that would be a Catholic going off to an evangelical or an Orthodox or some other ecclesial group and getting ordained, or a priest getting ordained or becoming a bishop in the Holy Roman Apostolic Church of Brazil and Paraguay for the mission of the salvation. The titles are very creative, but the reality is real. We have the responsibility for this because there are consequences, like there are consequences for every crime. Article 3 in the same Sacramentorum Sanctitatis Tutela, we'll just call it SST from now on, concern crimes against the Eucharist. So the first one is when a person takes or retains for a sacrilegious purpose or throws away the consecrated species mentioned in Canon 1382. It's pretty hard to find a photograph of somebody doing this on the internet, so this was the closest that I could. Then we have a situation of when a person attempts the liturgical action of celebrating Mass. I know that Bob is going to mention this because we know that this is not as rare as you might imagine. And then you have a situation where there could be the concelebration of Mass, which is prohibited in Canon 908, with ministers of ecclesial communities who don't have apostolic succession. So here we have a photograph, and you can look under the arrow and see there's a lady with a bit of a ponytail, and she's dressed like the others, and she's got a blue stole, so she's immediately standing out because we don't have blue stoles, mostly in the Catholic Church, and she's there among a group of priests concelebrating the Mass. So here's a good example of Article 3. A strange one from time to time would be the consecration for a sacrilegious purpose of one of the species, so bread and not wine, or even of both, but outside the Eucharistic celebration. It's strange, doesn't happen too often, but it is a crime. Then Article 4 looks at the whole world of penance and reconciliation. And the first delict there is the absolution of an accomplice in a sin against the sixth commandment mentioned in Canon 1384. And the second is the attempted sacramental absolution or the prohibited hearing of confession mentioned in Canon 1379. Then you have another reality, which is the simulated sacramental absolution. And then, fourthly, the solicitation to a sin against the sixth commandment of the Decalogue in the act, on the occasion, or under the pretext of confession, if it is directed to sinning with the confessor himself. We do have cases of this. Still under Article 4, still dealing with confession, this is a big one. It's the direct and the indirect violation of the sacramental seal. And then one which you mightn't hear about too often, but the recording made in any way, or the malicious diffusion through any of the media communications of what is said in sacramental confession, whether actual or simulated, by the confessor or the penitent, as mentioned in 1386. Article 5 is the attempted ordination of a woman. And this is now the part where we spend most of our time in the office dealing with the crimes against a minor, against the sixth commandment committed by a cleric. For us, of course, a minor is a person under the age of 18. We know that in civil jurisdictions throughout the world, there are different ages of consent. Sometimes it's 16 or 15, and in other countries, it's even lower than that again. And then you have the situation of a person who might be over 18, but is effectively like a child. And he or she is like a child. Why? Because that person habitually has the imperfect use of reason. Now, already here, you might be thinking, are these vulnerable people, vulnerable adults? We don't deal with vulnerable adults, strictly speaking, because everybody is vulnerable. You've lost your job, you're sick, you're in the seminary for the first week, and you've got a rector who's really bossy and really controlling. Our understanding of vulnerable people is this category, a person who habitually has the imperfect use of reason, who is over the age of 18. That's the only kind of vulnerable person we deal with. An interesting thing here is that ignorance or error on the part of the cleric regarding the age of the minor does not constitute an extenuating or exonerating circumstance. So he might think that just because the minor posted himself as a different age on Facebook, that it was okay to do what he did. It's not. In the world of child sexual abuse, you also have the phenomenon, the reality, the all too present reality of pornography. And this is why Article 6 deals with the acquisition, possession, exhibition, or distribution for purposes of sexual gratification or profit of pornographic images of minors under the age of 18. It wasn't always 18, it used to be 14. And the last time we renewed and updated the law, we moved the age to 18. So since that time, the crime has been 18. But if it was before that time, if the crime had been committed before the change, then it was 14. So you need to look very carefully at when the crime was committed. And it concludes, in any manner and by any means whatsoever by a cleric. So when you're sending us any kind of case, Articles 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we don't want to destroy all the forests of the world, and we don't need 3 copies of the case. We just need 1 copy, please. If possible, we ask you to send the tabular presentation to us by email. That's great help. Here's a situation which we find in countries where people have double surnames. Sometimes a person, a bishop or a religious superior, will send us a case of Carlos Morales. And we register the case as Father Carlos Morales of the Diocese of Bogota, let's just say. And then when the bishop sends the material, it turns out that it's Marco Carlos Patricio Morales Gonzalez. And we think this is somebody else. And we open up a new file on the second person, only to realize when we write back to the bishop, he goes, no. It's the same guy. But he has provided partial information the first time. So we ask you, please, from the beginning, send us all of his names. And sometimes we find people who are diocesan priests who then decide to become hermits and take on a new name and call themselves Fra Agostino, but we don't know his real name. So what I'm really saying to you is we need clarity from the beginning. This is the tabular presentation that I was mentioning. It's available in a link in the Vademecum, and I'll talk about the Vademecum in a second. So when you send your material, or very often your Procurator General will bring the information to us, this is what happens once it comes inside the building. It's seen by the prefect, because often the letters are addressed to him. But if you address the letter to him or to me, it's fine. We see them anyway. I get to see them, the Undersecretary and the Promoter of Justice get to see everything. Then it's registered, so we have a trace of everything that comes in and everything that goes out, and then it's given to the capo ufficio, so the head of the section, who then transfers the material to an official. And the official is either given the material because he's from a certain country or region, or because he's an expert in that particular question, or it might be for linguistic reasons. The official will do the initial examination. Then he will prepare like a summary or a presentation of the case with all the essential elements, because they do the heavy lifting. And then they present the material to us in a way that we can then make a decision. So it's an excellent system. After the presentation, there's a discussion, or often a colloquium even with me. And then Bob chairs what we call an internal commission. I'll talk about that in a moment. The internal commission is a sit-down meeting between the head of the office, the official who's studying the case, and the promoter of justice. 3 different sets of eyes, 3 different viewpoints, all looking at the same case. So before they come together at the commission, they have all studied the case. They've made their notes, they've underlined things, they've maybe made suggestions as to how to bring the case forward. I was privileged to sit at Bob's table for 5 years and to be part of the internal commission. For me, it was a tremendously important learning experience. It was a work of synodality, it was a work of listening, reasoning. Nobody was afraid to make a comment or to say, what about this? Everybody felt the freedom to make a contribution, knowing that the whole purpose of this commission was to arrive at the truth and to make the next step so that we can apply justice. So what kind of things does the commission do? First of all, it may authorize an administrative penal process or a judicial penal process. In some cases, they find it necessary not to do that, but to maybe impose a penal remedy. Or in some other cases, to apply administrative measures as outlined in Canon 1341. If they don't do any of those things, they may wish to archive the case. In a more complicated case, they realize that this is like beyond the scope of what the commission can do, so they send the case forward for a higher level of examination, which is called in Italian the congresso. Congress, I suppose, is the best word. But they can also examine and support a request for a dispensation from the obligations of the clerical state and dispensation from religious vows. If they don't have enough information, they can agree that the best thing to do is to ask the ordinary for more information, or if they say the best thing to do is to wait until the outcome of the civil process has given its findings, and they would wait, or dilata. They would perhaps request a cleric's defense if there is a case of schism, or if they realize on examination that the material is not of our competence, they would then agree to transfer the material to another dicastery which is competent. And one of the last things they do then is evaluate the question of granting a derogation from prescription. Now, after the commission, the official goes back to his office and drafts a letter and translates into letter form what the thinking of the commission is. Then the letter goes right back up the chain from the capo ufficio, promoter, all the way up to me, or sometimes to the prefect. When we get to the congresso, here are some examples of cases that are presented in congresso. The first would be, after a process, the question of a hierarchical recourse. That would be an administrative process. There could be an evaluation of a recourse in cases of dismissal from the religious institute of a cleric where there are delicts of our competence. And there could also be an examination of grave cases to be presented to the Holy Father for dismissal from the clerical state and or from religious vows, according to Article 26. We also deal with all clerics. So that means, of course, deacons, priests, and also bishops. So in the congresso, we would evaluate the results of a first investigation, the investigazione previa, involving a bishop. We look at requests for the authorization of a process involving a bishop, because we have to have a mandate from the Holy Father to authorize a process involving a bishop, whereas we don't involving priests and deacons. The Congresso looks at remitting the penalty of excommunication, latae sententiae, and if we are going to do the process ourselves, which we do very rarely, it's in the Congresso that we decide the authorization of what kind of process, quorum DDF. But we're not finished there. We also can sanate acts if there are just some merely procedural aspects. or we can give a dispensation from irregularities under the competence of the DDF. And then we used to have the cases of dispensations of clerics until 1988. Then it passed to divine worship, and it's now for diocesan clerics in clergy. But the cases that we had until 1988, if somebody is coming back, although there are very few because they're all very old at this stage, but if we have those cases, we're the ones for readmission. So as you can see already, the whole atmosphere, the whole way of working in the dicastery is one of transparency, because the internal commission is done as a group of 3, the congress is done as a group of all the superiors and all of the officials of the discipline section. So for us, it becomes a great learning experience, especially when we get new officials, or if the promoter often has some very good suggestions for how to move forward in a new way, in a more efficient way. We're all there every Friday, learning and improving and constantly improving. So it's a really, really good, it's a really good school in many ways of ongoing canon law. The College for Recourses is when an administrative penal process is celebrated. So it's given to, let's just say, the Jesuits. The accused makes a remonstratio to the author of the decree, and if the author of the decree upholds his decision, he can make a hierarchical recourse to us. If we uphold the decision, he has one more chance, and that final chance is to the College for Recourses, which I said to you earlier was presided over by Archbishop Charles Scicluna. And the idea was that those cases used to go to the Feria Quarta, to the Wednesday meeting of the cardinal and bishop members, and then they separated some of the canonical experts and they created this College of Recourses for a greater level of efficiency. So when the case is being brought to the Holy Father, it's our prefect who brings the case. He brings effectively a one-page summary of the case and the tabular presentation that either you have prepared or we have prepared or we've added to what you've done. The Pope is responsible for granting dispensations in cases involving our competence. And just a word on dispensations. A dispensation is a personal request by a cleric to the Pope to be released from his obligations of the clerical state and or religious vows. It's not a solution to graviora cases. Some people would say that a priest who gets a dispensation gets off lightly because sometimes the process is abandoned and the case is closed with the dispensation. And sometimes you have victims who complain to say, we never found if he was actually declared guilty or not. So, there's no reason why a process cannot continue. We will only present cases to the Pope where the person requests properly, the superior supports it, and we support it. But if we have a doubt, we will put the doubt onto the folio for the audience and let the Pope decide in the end. So we see the dispensation as being a means established by canon law, not as a solution, and not as a cover up the situation approach, but something which is possible. But it's not a guarantee. Just because you ask for it doesn't mean you're always going to get it. So there are some requirements. It has to be a request to the Holy Father, not to Cardinal Fernandez, not to me, not to the superior and not to the provincial. It has to say that the person knows what he's asking for. He's asking for a dispensation from all the obligations of the clerical state. He's not saying, take away the obligation of obedience, take away the obligation to say the breviary. I want to say Mass by myself in my room. No. It also includes celibacy and the return to the lay state. He has to sign and date the letter in his own hand, and then it has to be accompanied by a favourable votum of the ordinary. Here is our sala consulta. So when I spoke to you about the congresso, this is where we sit. This is where we should be today. But actually, yesterday we did the cases so we could be with you today. There are other things that take place in the same sala consulta. Yesterday we had the bishops from Cambodia and Laos, so that would be the ad limina visits, the Feria Quarta, which is the cardinal and bishop members, the College for Recourses, Archbishop Scicluna and his team of lawyers, the consultors, some of you are Raffaele, Talmel, groups of candidates to come to us from all over the world. We had Krakow, we have Canada, we have Washington, we have places from all over the world coming to see us. We have theological faculties coming to learn about the work, and we have other groups as well. The Vademecum is our best attempt to help people who don't know what to do because they're new, and we realize how this happens. We realize that you were very happy as the head of a university. You were the head of a mission in a place. You were teaching, you were working with the poor, you were doing social development, you were doing all those things. And then, because of an election in a chapter, you found yourself here in Rome as the Superior General with no preparation for this. Let me just share with you that all of us came to work at the Dicastery not with experience in penal law, but with doctorates in matrimonial law. So we all had to learn through the example and through the tradition and what was handed down to us. And because we help each other to grow and to learn and to improve, and because we've had some excellent people, and I really want to mention Bob because he brought so much experience of the religious life and the canons involving religious life to us. It's really broadened our understanding, and we are now in a position where we can share this with you through the Vademecum. So it's a step-by-step guide where we literally walk with you and help you to understand. It's not law. It's not the same value as SST. It's not the same value as the code, but it does help. And this Vademecum, the most recent one that's available, was produced in 22. As I said to you, it's not a legal text. It's an instrument. And while it is focused on child sexual abuse cases, the principles behind it also apply to the other cases of our competence. We are right now almost ready to produce the third version, which is a newly improved and refined version with some modifications, and it will be available in a number of languages. We're doing the translation work right now as we speak in the Dicastery, and it'll be on the website. Another thing to remember, as I said to you about the pornography cases a number of years ago, is that the law in force at the time, so we've had 3 versions of SST, 2001, 2021, and 2010. The law is different, so you need to look at when the crime was committed. You need to look at each version of those laws to see which law was applicable at the time. All of our material that I've spoken about, the SST and the Vademecum, are on the Vatican website. And in summary, what I would say to you is the mission of the Dicastery, like your mission, is to look both ways. We are looking to serve the Holy Father, and we are looking to serve the local church by discovering the truth and applying justice. And we remain not an office for our own glory or our own satisfaction. We remain purely an instrument in the hands of the Holy Father.
Thank you, Archbishop John. Thank you very much for your clarity and openness, and simplicity also is very clear, and thank you so much. Now, I think that it should be better to take a little break, do you think? Because I don't know how long it will take to answer. Is very deep.
Parliamo un po'. So what I have is a synthesis of your questions that are questions. Now, when we were planning this, it was important for you to have your table time and then an open discussion so that we also can learn. What I've done is I've got about 27 of the questions, about half of the questions that came in, to present. On the one hand, that can assist with provoking your conversation at tables and then our conversation. I can reduce that. I can do that quickly. And so I think it will be a good stimulus. And I can do that in 10 or 15 minutes. On the other hand, we need to go to the bathroom and do other things. So
we can do this now. So
okay, let's do this now. And please hand me this. So what we'll do, and I want to touch the lower one or the higher one? I want the higher one. Okay, so we'll go quickly through this. I won't offer many answers, but we can come back to this. As you can see, there are 28 of, that's about half of what was sent in that we chose. Now, before we begin, and Archbishop Kennedy made this very clear, please remember that we're not limited to Article 6 and abuse of minors. So here are some questions related to reserve della cases and their processing. What cases or allegations should be reported to the Dicastery for Doctrine of the Faith? It's the list that John mentioned, Articles 2 through 6, Schism and Heresy, Eucharist, Sacrament of Reconciliation, attempted ordination of a woman, and the question about minors. In red, I have here the question number as it came in. So how long for the examination of a case? We can speak about that in the second hour. What can be done to have things go more quickly, knowing that people, the last line there, may be innocent. On these slides, I put in color the language in which the question was submitted, as well as the English underneath. This too, question number 3, is about the time that is necessary. Perceived resolving conflicts, it's not always clear how to improve the effectiveness. We can speak to that in the second hour. Feel free to bring these questions. It's same thing. So a number of questions came in about what tools, orientations can help to reduce the duration of procedures. We want to work together. We want to be as streamlined as we can be. So we can speak to this in the second hour. Now this question about loss of the clerical state. Now, reducing, I will stop to, oh no, that's a mistake there. In which case is necessary reduction to the lay state for religious clerics. We can speak to that. It's never necessary, okay? It's never necessary. It's always an option. Sometimes it's a strongly encouraged option. What criteria does the dicastery use to limit the statute of limitations? We definitely want to talk about that. The lifting of prescription. Lifting of prescription. What are the criteria for that? I would be very happy to speak to, we would be very happy to speak to that in the second hour. Taking a case directly to the Supreme Pontiff. Most of the clerical institutes institutes that have clergy members, I would suspect that you have had what we call an Article 26 case. Used to be Article 2122, now it's Article 20, going directly to the Holy Father. What are those cases? Here's a great question in the second hour to speak to. Is it possible for a member to remain on a safety management plan indefinitely? I suspect that question came in from a superior general who was probably previously a provincial. This is a question that provincials have to deal with. And then the whole question of a preliminary investigation, we can come back to that. The interface here, as you can see, towards the end of the question, the civil process, how the interaction between civil processes and canonical processes. How can you... Yeah, okay, a little bit more slowly. How can superiors general do better? And then how can we do better? So what can superiors do better? And then here are competency. What DDF handles and what we don't handle. So here we have a question of abuse, and the person is, I think it's easier for me to look down here. If the brother or priest, we have a religious sister, abuses not a minor but an adult. Should that come to DDF or not? Here we have a proposal to have an instruction concerning non-ordained religious. We only deal with religious. DDF, clerics. DDF only deals with clerics, but we can talk about that more. The loss of the clerical state, we only handle those that are reserved to us. We can talk about the loss of the clerical state in the second hour. Abuse of power, we also have a question here, spiritual abuse. I am passionate about this. I regret that I can only give a half of an answer. We can speak about that in the second hour. Spiritual abuse, abuse of power. It's on all of our minds, and not just men's congregations, women's congregations as well. And here we go again. So there were 3 or 4 questions on this question of spiritual abuse. What happens when a religious priest is dismissed, and questions about incardination, especially if he has a history that may involve a reserved delic. This other question is along the same lines. Those who have left and wish to come back. This is a question submitted in Spanish, as you can see, but this is a universal question. And then vulnerable adults, John touched upon that. We can come back and talk about that. That's not what our dicastery does, but we also understand that that's not a sufficient answer for you. So we can touch upon that again. Vos estis lux mundi. We can have that can come up in the second hour with your table, and how our dicastery interfaces with vos estis lux mundi. We have a generic question: how should abuse of minors and vulnerable persons be addressed? The concluding questions are these, and there are 6 of them. I put these in a miscellanea category. What are the most effective forms to have collaboration in the preliminary phase of an investigation? Yes, the beginning is most important. How a case begins, if it begins well, it often finishes well. We can talk about that. how to improve synergy between, this is a great question, came in, as you can see, in Italian, question number 8, between who we are and how we operate and work with you. We hope even our presence here this morning, and indeed your invitation, we hope that that is a step in that direction. This is a question I definitely would like to come back to. A congregation having its own vademecum. The first time I was asked this question was when I was still Procurator General of the Society of Jesus over 20 years ago with the Redemptorists. Joe Tobin was still the general at the time. Superiors who find themselves in a civil dilemma because of what a member is doing. Here we have from decades ago, and the Superior General is asked to issue an apology. And then finally, this is the last question as we go into the break. This is a question, it's a wonderful question for you, and I would love to, that was asked of us, but I would like to hear you as Superiors General on this, and I'll read it in its entirety. It was submitted, as you can see, in Italian. When intervening in possible cases of abuse by religious subject to a superior, how can a Superior General maintain a balance between the need to ensure observance of ecclesiastical discipline, the just reparation of harm caused, and fraternal charity, which must never be lacking? And this, of course, would be on the spectrum of those who are as guilty as the sun in the sky, as well as those who are as innocent as a newborn baby and are falsely accused, and everything in between. Thank you.
Thank you so much.